In 2002, two young men walked into the Central Bank of Nigeria to seek approval for the purchase of a distressed commercial bank. But instead of an approval, the 36-year-old men were met with a rejection regarding the concern that they were too young to own a bank. Among the duo was Herbert Wigwe, and the distressed financial institution in question was Access Bank PLC. However, what seemed like a turndown became the beginning of a historic event in Nigeria's banking industry, one that suddenly turned Herbert into one of the richest bankers in West Africa and custodian of Africa's largest financial institution. What is the chilling story behind the rise of Herbert Wigwe, and how did he go from an ordinary bank worker at GT Bank to flipping the story of Access Bank? Young Herbert was born on August 15, 1966 to Mr. Shingo Wigwe, former Director General of the Nigerian Television Authority, and Mrs. Wigwe, a nurse. Beginning his early childhood in the ancient city of Ibadan, Oyo State, Herbert grew up with 5 siblings and several other children, who, according to Herbert, were fostered by his parents. Originally from Rivers State, the Wigwe family would eventually move to different parts of Nigeria, giving Herbert and his siblings a diverse cultural upbringing and a broad educational foundation. After the completion of his early education in Ibadan, Herbert Wigwe enrolled in the Federal Government College in Sokoto for his secondary school education, which he eventually completed at Federal Government College, Warri, in 1982. The studious young scholar owes his devotion to his parents, who had zero tolerance for academic failure, creating an expectation that not only turned Herbert into a genius in mathematics, but also a student with an urge to count both numbers and money. Hence, his dream to become a banker was born, steering his path to accountancy for his tertiary education. His initial attempt at the Joint Admission Matriculation Board JAMB exam saw his dream institution turn down his application to study accounting, alternatively offering him a BSc program in actuarial science. Knowing what he wanted, Herbert rejected the offer, opting to retake the JAMB exam and intensify his efforts. This decision ultimately paid off when, in 1983, the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, extended an offer of admission for him to study accounting. After completing his 4-year undergraduate studies with a second-class upper, Herbert proceeded for the National Youth Service Program, where he served in the bubbling financial sector in Lagos State in 1988. This was no ordinary moment in the banking industry, as the Babangida-led government in Nigeria had just introduced policies that were steering the country towards a new era of banking transformation. Opportunities were abundant for young aspirants like Herbert, who were open to lots of career opportunities, learning avenues and first-hand experiences. For Herbert, it was just more than that. It was during this moment that he met his beloved wife through a mutual friend and proceeded to marry Doreen Chizoba less than 4 months after they met. Together, they had their first child in 1995. Following the completion of his National Youth Service, Herbert was quickly assimilated into the labor market, securing a role with an accounting firm as a graduate assistant and eventually qualifying as a chartered accountant in 1989. With such a beautiful flower on his resume, Herbert was able to secure a full-time job with Capital Merchant Bank as a credit analyst. But before he could barely settle into his new job, the young accountant was presented with a career-defining opportunity, a British Council scholarship to North Wales University, now Bangor University, to pursue a master's degree in banking and finance. Unable to resist the offer, he quickly accepted the scholarship and jetted off to the UK in 1990. After a year of rigorous studies, Herbert Wigwe successfully completed the master's program and returned to his home country. With an outstanding academic resume and an impressive professional background, he joined a small financial firm named Guarantee Trust Bank at a time when the startup bank was still a startup and needed capable hands. Capable hands they needed, and Herbert delivered. His colleagues described him as one of the cleverest people at the establishment and earned their respect in no time. He was also known to display exceptional capabilities in chasing accounts, networking, and accomplishing tasks that no one else was capable of. Slowly, he earned his place among the higher ranks, climbing judiciously and proving himself worthy at every role. With the substantial wages, Herbert was able to rent an apartment in the posh Victoria Island neighborhood, having the Access Bank head office as a next-door neighbor and Intercontinental Bank in the same building. Unknown to Herbert, he would go on to own both banks in the future, reinforcing the idiomatic expression that compares reality to nothing but a small world. If you're enjoying this documentary, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support enables us to continue sharing compelling stories like this one. Now, let's get back to the story. In 1996, the young banker traveled to the UK for yet another educational tourism, enrolling at the University of London for a master's program in financial economics. This came with a crucial need to upgrade his professional skills to keep up with the demanding roles of his rapidly advancing career at GT Bank. These deliberate efforts towards self-development and more finally paid off in 1998 when Herbert Wigwe was eventually promoted to the position of an executive director. Together with other exceptional colleagues, he was sent to Harvard Business School for a 3-month course on executive management in preparation for their new role. However, this became the beginning of the end of Herbert's career at GTB. According to a CEO of the bank, who also went on the same program, the journey was a kind that shaped the minds of its goers in a way that they never returned the same. For Herbert, his learning experience at HBS was the final pull he needed to begin looking beyond the walls of his current workplace. In his own words, "We had worked with several banks in the past, so we weren't afraid of the unknown. At certain points, we had to act for the founders. So, at a very young age, we were already comfortable running an institution. It also helped that we spent some time in Harvard with people who were doing great things in their countries." In the use of the pronoun we, he was referring to a great long-time colleague and partner, Ig Imokwede. Together, after they had returned from the Harvard Business School training, they began looking for opportunities to establish institutions of their own. However, it all had to be done behind the backs of their superiors to avoid an early sabotage of their plans. In pursuing the dream, Herbert and his partner appointed an advisor team of lawyers, investment bankers, and industry experts. The quest, tagged Project Festival, was aimed at finding a suitable bank that the duo could purchase and take over. However, the search revealed that their choice list of banks, which were doing fairly well by industry standards, were quite expensive to afford, while the affordable ones were either in bad financial conditions or operated with a value system that didn't align with Herbert and his partner. However, they continued their search, narrowing down to even younger banks. Just as they were beginning to get weary, an opportunity flung open when a certain bank decided to raise funds by offering $1 billion worth of shares for sale. The bank was quickly assessed by Herbert and his team, revealing that the financial institution was under a widespread investigation by the CBN for alleged foreign exchange malpractices. But Herbert and his team were not willing to back down for a few reasons. 1. The bank's board of directors featured men whom Herbert and his partner respected very much. Secondly, the bank was enlisted in the Nigerian Stock Exchange, implying that they were operating on some minimum standards of governance. And lastly, by analysis of the financial experts, the bank was healthy on several parameters. But in spite of all these, a huge problem stood in their way. Herbert and his partner only had the sum of 200 million naira compared to the 1 billion naira needed to fully take the offer. Hence, they began negotiating with investors to raise funds for the remaining 800 million naira while going into talks with the bank stakeholders. Once the money was complete and the offer approved by the Securities Exchange Commission, Herbert and his partner swooned into the deal, buying all 1 billion worth of shares presented by the bank. Once the transaction was done, rumors began circulating in the banking sector that two young guys from GTB had just bought Access Bank PLC. Even the founder CEO of GTB had reportedly received a call from a friend inquiring if he was the one who had made the acquisition, a question that only drew the attention of the CEO to the activities of his boys. An emergency meeting was called by the head executive at GT Bank, summoning Herbert and his partner. They demanded to know the truth about the ongoing rumor, and the duo confessed to being involved in the transaction. Meanwhile, they withheld any crucial information that could be used by their superiors to undermine their plans. When it had dawned on the GTB CEO and other executives that the minds of Herbert and his colleagues could not be changed, they were asked to resign their positions immediately. And so they did, moving on to Access Bank to solidify their acquisition. Little did they know that their battles wouldn't get any easier. The existing board and management of Access Bank didn't find it quite exciting that two relatively young banking professionals, not wealthy businessmen or industry veterans, but ordinary ex-workers of a fellow bank, were in the position of what they perceived as a hostile takeover of their firm. This threw the stakeholders into a defensive stance at the idea of Herbert and Ike coming to take head positions at the bank. But the real roadblock for the two banking professionals came from the Central Bank of Nigeria. Inasmuch as some top CBN officials personally knew Herbert and his partner, the final decision rested with the Director of Banking Supervision. The director was quite skeptical of the young men's ability to lead the bank at just 36, declining their request to take control of the firm. Luckily for Herbert, the CBN's decision only stated that it would not approve of them to run the bank but wouldn't stop any of their efforts to do so. Despite all this, Herbert and Ike Imokwede officially became the front leaders of Access Bank in March 2002, thanks to their major shareholding. However, they weren't fully recognized as the bank's leaders yet. It wasn't until April 17, 2003 when the CBN officially gave its blessing, though only temporary, on the requirement that they prove their leadership capabilities over the next 2 years. Herbert and his partner set a vision for the bank to make it one of the top 10 banks in the country by the next 5 years. At the time, Access Bank was ranked at 65 out of the 89 banks in Nigeria. But with the solid leadership background gained by Herbert and his partner at GT Bank, where they were entrusted with the autonomy to run it successfully, replicating that success at Access Bank was hardly a cause for concern.
Our confidence was built from the fact that we had done it before. Where we first started, or where I first started as a banker, was also an entrepreneurial environment.
Following an announcement by the CBN in 2004, which required that all banks had to raise at least 25 billion naira in capital to stay in business, the Access Bank leaders saw an opportunity to accelerate their growth plans. They rallied their team, launched a public offer, and quickly raised 15 billion naira, affording the Access Bank leadership the liquidity to acquire Marina Bank and Capital Bank, further strengthening its capital base. They converted the $15 million loan from a Netherlands finance company to equity, so that by the time the 2005 deadline stated by the CBN had arrived, Access Bank had not only met the capitalization requirement, but were also several steps ahead of many competitors. This motivated the CBN to officially recognize the leadership of Access Bank, approving Ike as CEO and Herbert as Deputy Managing Director. Between 2006 and 2007, they raised even more money for the bank. First, 11.9 billion naira through a local bond, and then a massive 136 billion naira from public investors. In no time, what was once a small startup bank had aggressively risen to become the 8th largest bank in Nigeria. By 2007, the fast-growing bank expanded into Africa, establishing subsidiaries in Gambia, Sierra Leone, Zambia, and Rwanda. And in 2008, Access Bank went international by launching in the UK. In 2012, Herbert and his partner came close to achieving a second vision of making Access Bank a top 5 bank in Nigeria when they made a power move of acquiring Intercontinental Bank, a deal that instantly expanded their assets and customer base. That same year, they raised $350 million through a hero bond to fuel more growth. In 2014, they secured $400 million through a subordinate note, a move that solidified their position as one of Nigeria's biggest banks. That same year, in compliance with the CBN's regulatory requirement limiting bank CEOs from serving more than 10 years, Ike had to step down, and Herbert Wigwe officially took over as CEO of Access Bank. Under his leadership, the bank continues to grow, but this time in a way no one ever saw coming. In 2018, Herbert led Access Bank PLC to the biggest ever bank merger in Nigerian banking history, absorbing Diamond Bank in a merger so significant that Access had to rebrand entirely. According to Herbert, the rationale behind this merger lay in the fact that Diamond Bank, once vibrant, was showing weariness but, however, had a successful stand in the retail market where Access Bank was quite lacking. This led to the mutual agreement to combine the two brands in what effectively turned Access into Nigeria's largest bank by assets. With 646 branches, the biggest ATM and POS network in the country, and a whopping 38 million customers, Access Bank had become a true powerhouse. But there was more to accomplish for Herbert. In 2019, Access Bank made history by introducing Nigeria's first ever green bond, a special type of loan that helps to raise money for eco-friendly projects. This was a part of their social commitments, which expanded across the music industry, Nollywood, and the arts, most loved by Herbert. Between 2020 and 2022, Access Bank penetrated deeper into the African market so that by the end of the period, it had grown into a global institution with over 6,000 employees serving 52 million customers in 17 countries. From the 65th ranking bank in Nigeria in 2002, Access Bank was now recording profits of up to 1 trillion naira by 2021. In 2022, Access Bank transformed into Access Holdings, a parent company that would oversee businesses in payments, insurance, consumer finance, and pensions, with subsidiaries involved in everything from banking and finance to agriculture, technology, and healthcare. The Access brand became more than just a bank. Herbert, in his own very love for education, erected a university in his home state named the Wigwe University. But following the sad events of February 19, 2024, the business tycoon unfortunately didn't live to see its inauguration. Herbert was involved in a tragic helicopter crash in the United States, killing along with him his wife, his eldest child, and a beloved colleague. His shocking passing left a deep void in his family, the banking world, and society as a whole. A national honor recipient, Herbert was known to champion the fight against malaria in Africa and the eradication of HIV/AIDS in Nigeria. Thanks to his charity foundation, a significant contribution has been made to child education, healthcare, youth empowerment, and mentorship. The banking mogul is survived by 4 children, with the eldest among them being 25 at the time of his death. His parents and 4 siblings, who have all been entangled in a legal dispute for his estate. Court documents reveal that Mr. Shingle and his children are not only demanding custody of his children, who are his sole heirs, but also access to his financial accounts. According to the family, it was not from a place of battle over inheritance, but from a place of concern over a potential mismanagement of the estate by his children. However, the court dismissed their application, stating that Mr. Shingle and his children were in no place to intervene, as they were neither beneficiaries nor trustees of the will. Herbert's surviving eldest child, Otutochi Wigwe, was appointed guardian over her minor siblings, and a cousin of Herbert, along his longtime friend and partner, Ike Imokwede, were entrusted to oversee the will according to Herbert's wishes. At Access Holdings PLC, late Herbert was succeeded by Bolaji Agbede, appointed as the group's acting CEO, while Ike Imokwede returned as board chairman. Roosevelt Ogbonna, who formerly served as deputy managing director, was installed as CEO of Access Bank. The life of Herbert Wigwe remains a story of vision and impact, with every step carefully taken to create lasting change. With a legacy not just about wealth, his passion speaks in the million lives he had touched, the dreams he supported, and his resounding impact on the Nigerian banking industry. And there goes the story of the man who was declared too young to lead a bank, although passing at just the age of 57, accomplished what could fit into 2 lifetimes.